completely different countries.
Who dat?
It's Mom. Okay. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Olivia. This is a channel where I talk about the presidents and make their favorite desserts. These are the guys that shape the world that we live in, so I think it's important that we know a little bit about them. At least we should know their names. At most, we should know what they like to eat. And I'm gonna try to cover everything in between that. And if you've noticed, we're kind of in a different location than I normally am, since it is Christmas Eve, and in the honor of Christmas, which is supposed to be all about family and presents. We are at my sister's house today. She is going to be a special guest in the video today. So everybody welcome my sister Molly. We are wearing matching pajamas because this year we're being extra. My dog has them too.
What are we doing today? I don't know anything about presents.
Oh yeah, Molly doesn't know anything. She's representing the general population right now.
Yes.
And with that said, let's continue the journey with the fourth president, James Madison. And for James, we will be making Dolley Madison's soft gingerbread. Start by preheating the oven to 350, then mix the flour, ginger, and cinnamon in a bowl. It worked out pretty well that James Madison's favorite dessert is gingerbread, and it is Christmas Eve. Sometimes timing really kicks you in the ass, but this time it really worked out. I didn't even plan that. This is brand new.
Brand spanking new.
Do you know anything about James Madison?
No. Nothing.
Neither did I. I do all the research the night before.
Did a whole outline and everything.
Yeah, I always do. James Madison was born in 1752 in Virginia on March 16th. So I think he's a Pisces, like me.
Sagittarius here.
James Madison was the oldest of 12 children, which is a lot. Back then they didn't have birth control, and they were trying to have as many kids as they could because a lot of them didn't make it probably. When James was 18, he left home to go to college in New Jersey. Back then it was called the College of New Jersey, but now it's known as Princeton. So he's also a fancy man. So since he was going to college in New Jersey, when the Revolutionary War broke out, he joined the Orange County militia to help fight in the Revolutionary War, but he was super short and like always sick. So he dropped out of the military because I guess being short is like, it wasn't acceptable. He was like 5'4".
Well, I guess Dad wouldn't have made the cut.
I know. Our dad is very short.
He's like 5'2".
I think he's like 5'3", because I'm 5'2". Taller than me.
Really?
I think so. Are these not labeled? She gave me teaspoons with no measurements on them. Oh, this doesn't fit. Why do I always have this problem? I mean, it's gingerbread.
That's gonna fit either.
Ooh. So yeah, after he dropped out of the military, he pursues a life or a career in politics. He started working in the legislature of Virginia, and when he was there, he met somebody else, Thomas Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson, like I said, he kind of had like a hand in each one of these freaking people's lives. James Madison and him had a lifelong friendship. They were always cool with each other, unlike Thomas Jefferson and everybody else. How many tablespoons did I put in? 3?
I think 2.
I think 3. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison both had a few things that they could bond over. They both were advocates for religious freedoms, which is great. And they both owned a lot of slaves in Virginia, which is not great. But like I said, all of the first 12 presidents, with the exception of John Adams and John Quincy Adams, all owned slaves. So 10 out of 12. So it's gonna keep coming up. They all owned slaves. So after the revolution was over, after we officially and successfully left Britain's rule, then we kind of had to figure out what we were gonna do. And the Articles of the Confederation were written, and this was kind of like the first draft of the Constitution, but it gave a lot of power to states, and there wasn't really like a central government, and each state kind of worked as their own country. So James Madison was like, this is shitty. This is not helping anybody. So he looked at other countries and he looked at like history and stuff like that. And he was like, we need a central government. So he took it upon himself to kind of write a new constitution. You want to put it in? Molly's gonna do something. James Madison took it upon himself to really kind of draft this new constitution that he thought was going to be a lot better. In this second draft of the Constitution, it included something that was really important, checks and balances. So James Madison was pretty much the first one who was like, hey, you know what we should have? We should try to make sure that the president can't take over. It was basically his idea to separate power into 3 branches. Do you know what they are?
No. I feel like I do, but I don't.
You do.
Yeah, I totally learned this, but.
Yeah. So he separated them into the executive branch, judicial branch, and what is it? Executive, judicial, and legislative.
I do know it.
This was pretty important, I think. I think this was like essential, and we definitely wouldn't have survived without this system. And that's why when somebody tries to threaten our checks and balances, it's really scary. You'll see that checks and balances come into play with like a lot of different presidents. There's like Nixon and like a bunch of other people, but we'll talk about that when we get there. And he also said that like governors and judges should have more power so that they can help out at the state's government level. This was basically how Virginia's government ran with the checks and balances. So James Madison was like, hey, why don't we just do this for the whole country? And what James Madison said is, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty is this: you must first enable the government to control the governed, and then, in the next place, oblige it to control itself. So basically what he's saying is we need to make it so that the government obviously can control its citizens and make sure that it's not freaking chaos, but they're also saying that the government can't have too much power. The government has to have some kind of self-control within itself so that it also doesn't become chaotic and overpowering. So this recipe calls for kind of a weird ingredient. Since they didn't have oil back then, they used beef drippings. So we're gonna have to cook the meat and then drain out the liquid and then put it in as oil.
Great.
Maybe it'll be good, I don't know. It's kind of like Rachel.
First there's a layer of ladyfingers, then a layer of jam, then custard, which I made from scratch. Then raspberries, more ladyfingers, then beef sauteed with peas and onions, then a little bit more custard, and then bananas, and then I just put some whipped cream on top.
Yeah, except in this case, the pages didn't get stuck together.
So this was James Madison's idea. So he had to present this to all the other people in government. And during this meeting, while they were debating about it and like everybody was throwing out their opinions, he was the one that took a lot of notes. He was the best note taker in town. He used all of these notes to make like the best constitution, I think, that he could. And this is why he's nicknamed the father of the Constitution. James Madison made sure to include a lot of people's opinions, and about this he said, "It's not the offspring of a single brain, but instead the work of many heads and many hangs." Many hangs. Many hangs. Many hangs. So yeah, he's saying it's a group effort, which is humble. I think, you know, he could have definitely been like, this was mine. And then after the Constitution was written, it was not in law yet. It still had to be passed throughout like society. And it was actually kind of a controversial document because it gave a lot of power to a central government, which everybody was still scared of because we still had some PTSD from Britain. Britain messed us up real good, and we were not ready to get in bed with another government who was just gonna treat us like that.
Fool me once, shame on you.
Yeah.
Fool me twice, shame on me.
Exactly. James Madison and his friends were like, don't worry guys, we won't do that to you. So Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison all wrote a series of essays. They wrote 85 essays in total. And James Madison wrote 29 of them. There is a song about this in Hamilton. I know I talk about Hamilton a lot, but it's just so relevant. This is called the Federalist Papers, and these papers and essays were passed out in the newspaper throughout the country, and it convinced all of the states to sign it. So I think 13 states ratified the Constitution, and then it became law. What's that song?
What song?
The How a Bill Becomes a Law song.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill.
You don't know that song? That's not really relevant to the Constitution. James Madison wasn't done yet, you know, for this country. He was like, guys, I know I'm already pretty cool, but I'm gonna wow you some more. So he was elected into the very new House of Representatives, and while he was in the House of Representatives, he wrote amendments to the Constitution, and these are called the Bill of Rights. Yay! So the Bill of Rights basically give us all of our rights: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all those things. James Madison is responsible for all of those liberties that we do have. Keep in mind, he did own slaves. So not everyone, but
didn't apply to everyone.
Not back then. Now, luckily, it does. He originally wrote 19 amendments, but only 10 were passed. Some of the amendments that didn't pass involved like how the House of Representatives would be appointed and how Congress would like initial a pay raise. In this amendment, it said that like the Congress could initiate a pay raise, but it wouldn't come into effect until the next Congress took place. So basically they could say, hey, I think I'm being paid shit, so I'm gonna raise this, but I won't get the money, the next guy will. Yeah, it didn't come into law, but I don't know, it's interesting.
There is a lot of juices we're gonna get out of this.
While James Madison and Thomas Jefferson both advocated for individual liberties, which is great, they both disagreed with Hamilton on his national bank idea, and this made Thomas Jefferson so mad that he resigned as Secretary of State under George Washington, and he and James Madison founded the Democratic Republican Party, and this was the first opposition party that America would have. So Thomas Jefferson felt really hated in George Washington's Congress, and James Madison was like his only friend, so.
I have friends. I definitely have friends. No one can say that I do not have friends. I have friends. I definitely have friends.
John Adams and him were not friends at this point, and he didn't get along with George Washington. Yeah, so Thomas Jefferson had beef with basically everybody else, but James Madison was his homie. He had his back, and they founded this new party. They were like, hey, you don't like me, I'll start my own club. It just says, mix your molasses with your drippings or lard or whatever fat you're using. Oh, it says whatever fat you're using.
Ew.
But we're authentic on this show. Not really, whatever we can find. You have the weirdest measuring cups. I don't think we'll taste it. I want to mention that there is no sugar in this recipe, but there is beef dripping. So Dolley was an innovative woman, double strained in this house. James Madison in 1794 married Dolley Payne Todd? Yeah, she was a Quaker widow who had one son. A lot of these men married widows, a lot of them. Dolley and James were very different from each other. James Madison was really quiet, he was really shy, he had a weak voice that he was embarrassed about, like, and that's why he didn't like to public speak. But Dolley was like the life of the party. She hosted parties all the time, she had dinner, she had gatherings, and she was like, and everybody loved Dolley. She was a hit. People liked Dolley a lot more than they liked James Madison. Like, even during the presidency, she was really charismatic and James Madison wasn't. I don't think that James Madison would have won today because he was short, and studies show that looks really do contribute to who wins these elections. But back in the 1800s, they didn't really campaign because there was no way, there was no TV, nobody really saw. No one really knew what these people looked like, and I think that really played a huge advantage for James Madison and like a lot of other presidents. Oh yeah.
It's like black tar.
Look at that baby.
Ew.
Look at that baby go. Also, Dolley Madison was 26 when they got married, and James Madison was 43.
Oh my god. I'm 26.
But this was obviously common for women to be really young during this era. I'm not saying it's right, I'm just saying it's common. Take this away. After all this happens, and after John Adams is in the presidency and messes up his whole reputation, then Thomas Jefferson becomes president, as we know. And since Thomas Jefferson and James Adams were such good pals, Thomas Jefferson obviously wanted him in his corner. So he made him Secretary of State. So James Madison was America's third Secretary of State. And unlike being Vice President, the Secretary of State actually did some stuff, or at least Thomas Jefferson gave James Madison some responsibilities. So we know that during Thomas Jefferson's presidency, the Louisiana Purchase was made, which is super important. This is when we purchased land from France and basically doubled the size of America. Thomas Jefferson actually made James Madison basically the supervisor of this whole project. That's pretty important, I think. So even though it happened under Thomas Jefferson's presidency and he obviously played a big role in it, so did James Madison. And I think they sent James Monroe to negotiate with France over that. And James Monroe is the 5th president, if you didn't know. After Thomas Jefferson resigns from presidency, because remember, like, there were no laws or anything saying that he couldn't run again. So I'm gonna say that Thomas Jefferson resigned from being president and running again. It was James Madison's turn to run for president. So James Madison then ran in the election of 1808, and he ran against Charles Pinckney. If you remember from my last video, Charles Pinckney is the guy that Thomas Jefferson also demolished in the election. He lost by a lot with Thomas Jefferson. He only got 14, I think, electoral votes to Thomas Jefferson's 162.
Wow.
So I don't know why he thought that it was a good idea to run again, but he did, and he lost.
1/4 cup is all we need?
Yeah.
I thought you said a cup.
So basically, James Madison's presidency was overtaken by one main thing, and that was the War of 1812. Remember when I talked about how Thomas Jefferson avoided going to war with Britain? It didn't work. Great Britain were being real douchebags to America because they were fighting with France in the Napoleon War, and they wanted America's support. They both wanted America's support, and America was like, no, we can't do that right now. We're broke. Then they started like kidnapping our sailors and using them in their own navy. And then they also helped Native Americans fight our troops, which is like kind of okay. But James Madison was like, no, these people are making a fool of us. I mean, what else could he do?
Steady.
Yeah, so he was gonna take this behavior from the British. He was like, look, we beat you once, we can do it again. So he declared war on the British, and this is called the War of 1812. This war against the British was super controversial. A lot of people hated James Madison for this. Like, because it killed our economy. We were not ready for a war. We didn't even have a real army yet. We kind of had a navy because John Adams expanded the navy, but we didn't have a real army yet.
Oh, I can't take the smell of the molasses.
Yeah. And some of the states were like, they wouldn't let their militias fight in this war. So even our own country was like so unsupportive of this war that they wouldn't let their soldiers fight in it, which I think is kind of funny. Like the states were like, no, we're not doing that. Ooh.
Made it fluffy and foamy.
There's some real stuff going on over here. Since this was something that was super criticized by the public, they didn't even call it the War of 1812. They called it Mr. Madison's War. Yeah. And I want to mention that James Madison was technically our first wartime president. He was the first president while we were actively at war with other people, which I think is something to note. So while the War of 1812 was going on, then the election of 1812 happened. So all of the stuff leading up to the War of 1812 happened before, but then during the election of 1812, this is basically when we were fighting the British. Well, it said to do it this way. We'll just keep doing it until it overflows.
It's starting to really smell like gingerbread.
I keep saying James Adams.
I know.
And
I'm
James,
not committed to this president.
oh my God. James Madison won the election of 1812, but he was still highly criticized by like everybody about this war because no one liked it. People didn't like this war so much because it killed our economy because all trade stopped between America and Europe. So understandably, this killed everything. And people hated it so much that New England even threatened to secede from America. So even before the Civil War, people wanted out.
Yeah, it's coming together.
This might be good, I don't know. And then the big shebang happens. Soupy.
Careful.
What? It's not even near the end. Anyway, so in 1814, British troops invade Washington, D.C., and they burn down a few buildings. One of them is the Library of Congress, and the other one is the White House. So these people burned down the White House, and Dolley Madison was inside this White House when it burned down. But Dolley Madison's kind of a bad bitch, and she was not scared. Instead, she would not leave the house until they rescued the big-ass 8-foot-tall portrait of George Washington.
Wow.
She was like, I'm not going anywhere. And this thing was nailed to the wall. And she ordered for them to break the frame and just take out the canvas.
She's crazy.
Yeah, so she wouldn't leave until this happened. And then like 2 New Yorkers like kept it safe or something. And she told these people, she was like, look, I'm glad that you saved it, but if the British try to confiscate it from you, destroy it.
What?
So yeah, so she was like, I'd rather it be destroyed than in British hands, but also I want this portrait more than I want my life. So she was a little bit contradicting.
In love with him?
No,
Little secret crush.
he was dead.
I know.
George Washington was dead at this
Her
point.
idol.
Yeah, everybody was in love with George Washington. Didn't you watch my video?
Yeah.
And then after the fire, James Madison and Dolley Madison were forced to evacuate Washington, D.C. So that's pretty crazy. If that happened today, could you imagine if somebody burned down the White House today?
That would be crazy.
It would be crazy. You guys know what time it is, right?
Greasing time.
Yeah. It's time to grease our pan, guys.
Let's grease this bitch.
In 1814, a treaty was finally signed and the War of 1812 stopped. But before the news spread, because you know, this was the olden days, it took a while to hear anything, we won a massive battle. So the war was already over, but then we won a battle, and this kind of ignited patriotism within us. And at the end of the war, all of the people that blamed James Madison for all the wrong in their life were like, hey, James, maybe you're okay. It ignited this flame within American people that we didn't have before. So James Madison, who was once like ridiculed and like highly criticized, was praised for this. All right, so this just has to go in the oven now, so we're gonna put it in the oven for about 30 minutes. We'll see you when we take it out. Hi guys, so it's finally done. It actually looks really good. I can show you it because it's stiff, unlike the other ones. To finish up, after James Madison left office, he went back to Virginia in 1817, and he actually became kind of like the dean of the University of Virginia, the university that Thomas Jefferson found. So honestly, James Madison kind of rode Thomas Jefferson's coattails like until the end. And after he left office, he was still pretty active in public services after that. And then at 85, James Madison died from heart failure in his home in Virginia. All right. So let's taste this. It says that like we could put powdered sugar on it, and like, why wouldn't we? Yeah. It has no sugar in the recipe other than this, so. Oh yeah, baby.
I think you're supposed to like sift it.
Well, I don't have a sifter. Ooh, all right.
Oh yeah. Yep, she really put it on there.
Oh yeah. Oh baby.
What is that cut?
What's wrong with my gut?
I thought you'd cut it like a loaf of bread, not like a weird circle.
It's not a circle.
It's a half circle. So that's just how we're doing it now.
It must be your knife.
It's my knife.
Stop roasting me, okay? You want to try?
Taste our gingerbread.
Welcome my sister's boyfriend, Alec. Fiance.
Hello. Oh yeah, that looks amazing.
Okay.
How she cut it?
Half circles. Okay, that's really powder all over your face. That is really good though. Wow.
It's a bit like sticky almost.
It is good. It's not like super sweet. You know what's in here, Alec? Beef drippings.
Beef drippings.
You can't make a house out of it.
Yeah.
That's for damn sure. It's pretty good. I don't know if I'd eat it every day, but
Not my favorite, but
It's better than I thought it was.
I have a suspicion that these presidents just wanted to make their wives feel good. So they like list these things as their favorite desserts. Not that they're
I mean,
bad.
it's a thing.
Yeah.
You know,
This
maybe
was
a
the best
reporter
thing.
was like, what do you like? And then like Dolly was right next to him. Super good for December 24th. All right, so that is James Madison. Do I think that James Madison was a good president? Honestly, yeah, I think that he did the best he could. Obviously, he was criticized for the War of 1812, but what else could he do?
Not own slaves. Could have done that.
Yeah, he could have not owned slaves, but I think he was an okay president as far as it goes. He was the first wartime president, so I think he set an example for those to follow. You know, was he the best president? No, but I do think that his legacy is from before his presidency. Obviously, writing the Constitution and the Bill of Rights means so much more than anything he did when he was actually president. James Madison, is he as hot as Okierte Odowndawan? What do you think?
Hell
No. He's ugly.
If you're really into the ghost butler thing of a haunted mansion, then he's your guy.
I will say, this is an older picture of him, but still.
You guys are mean.
All right, guys, so thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope you guys are learning something and that you're very entertained.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for Molly for being on this episode. And as always, all of my links to my research will be down below, as well as the recipe and a link to a podcast that I listen to called Presidential. I strive for historical accuracy, but there's a lot of information out there and a lot of it is contradicting. So if you have something to say, write it in the comments below. But as always, be nice in the comments.
Be nice.
Yeah, be nice. And with that, I'll see you guys next Thursday for the 5th president, James Monroe.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.